Good morning. My name is Officer Viola Brock, and I'm a native Washingtonian. I joined the MPD Cadet Corps as a young, impressionable 18-year-old teen mom who was starting her first professional job after high school. It was a big change and a lot of responsibility, but by far one of the best decisions I've made. This job has given me the opportunity to provide for my daughter while being a part of one of the best law enforcement agencies in the country. I started Cadet Corps in February of 2015 and graduated from the program in May of 2017. During those 2 years as a cadet, I learned so many things, like the importance of having a good work ethic and the benefits of being in my community and giving back. The list goes on. I am fortunate for the relationship-building skills I mastered while being a cadet, and they continue to serve me in my day-to-day policing as a patrol officer. Being a police officer in the same city where I was born and raised means so much to me. I am personally invested in being the best version of myself and giving the citizens of the district the best help and support I can offer each and every day. It is now my honor and privilege to introduce the Honorable Mayor Muriel Bowser.
Thank you, Officer. Thank you. Thank you. Give Officer Brock a big round of applause. And it is wonderful to be with everybody this morning at the beautiful Dunbar Senior High School in Ward 5. I am happy to be with Chief Conti and members of my public safety team. And before we turn to the business at hand, I just wanted to remark on an outstanding Washingtonian who we lost yesterday, a friend, a journalist, and a great lover of all things Washington, D.C. So I know I speak for thousands of us, certainly for all of us who have literally watched Bruce Johnson for his entire career at Channel 9, of how devastated we are to have lost him so soon, but how grateful we are to have known such a bright light. So please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. So we are here to talk about public safety, and you see these wonderful professionals who are standing behind me. You heard from Officer Brock, and you're about to hear from the Chief of Police. I sent a couple of weeks ago to the Council a $19.5 billion budget. It is the most equitable budget developed under Home Rule. It is a budget that is focused on what we're hearing from the community. And first and foremost, Washingtonians want to make sure that we are investing in building a safer D.C., on making D.C. more affordable, and on creating more opportunities to keep our young people engaged in safe activities and more opportunities to ensure that they are connected to good paying jobs. It makes significant investments in our students and schools, and I'm delighted that we're going to be also recognizing and hearing from some of our outstanding principals at D.C. Public Schools. Give them a big round of applause. Ooh, those principals had some work these last 2 years, and they've done it with aplomb. It includes $13.5 million to dramatically expand offerings through our Department of Recreation, a $60 million indoor sports complex that will serve our entire city at RFK, and which will create fantastic new opportunities for our boys and girls to compete and train. This budget also does what D.C. residents have talked to me about in every corner of the city. And they want to make sure that the Metropolitan Police Department is fully staffed and resourced with the officers it needs to keep our community safe. That means hiring almost 350 officers this year and making sure that we're doing everything possible to keep the officers that we have. Currently, the department has about 3,500 sworn members. And it is critical that we close the gap between 3,500 and put ourselves on a path to 4,000 officers. So if we're thinking about why 4,000, it comes down to this. 4,000 officers is the number Chief Conti tells me we need to do 4 things. First, we have to improve our response times. We've seen those times creeping up over the past several years. The time between when you place a 911 call and when an officer is able to show up is increasing year over year, and that's unacceptable. Unacceptable. Second, we need more officers so that we can increase police presence in our neighborhoods. Just the other day, I was walking on Kennedy Street. And a number of residents told me, Mayor Bowser, you had a car posted here, and we noticed and we felt safer when that car was there. But it hasn't been there in a few weeks. I haven't even had a chance to talk to the chief about it. But I told them that that presence not only makes people feel better, it actually drives down crime on corridors like Kennedy Street. Third, we need officers patrolling. And we need investigators and detectives making big cases and closing those cases. You remember we lost a child. Her name was Nia Courtney. And the work that MPD was able to do with its partners and detectives and investigators was make sure that the people who were responsible for lawlessness in and around that area at MLK and Malcolm X are being held accountable. That's what it means when we have enough officers. They're patrolling, but they're also investigating, making cases, and delivering those cases to our prosecutor. And fourth, we need to recognize and plan for the fact that MPD is being called on more and more to respond to situations that we had for the last 3 weeks. People from all over the country coming to protest this thing or that. And MPD placing its officers on the front lines to make sure that the city can function. So what I have proposed is $30 million for hiring, recruiting, and retaining a properly staffed MPD. I didn't ask for a little bit of this and a little bit of that. This is an entire package, and the package needs to move together to allow us to have the force we need. We are focused on making D.C. residents like the good Officer Brock here and the young people standing behind me the way we get to 4,000. We're focused on hiring more women, which we also know that our cadet program does really well. So I want to thank the principals, as I mentioned, because they make sure that the cadet program is working for us. We know how this program changed Chief Conti's life and is doing so much for our young people. So we're going to do everything possible to make sure that every neighborhood in Washington, D.C. is safe. It's my job to tell the people what we need. Our law enforcement leaders say this is what we need, and we need it all together. We need to be able to hire and train, but we also need to be able to retain the good officers that we have. So with that, I would like to turn it over to our Chief of Police, a graduate of MPD's cadet program, and somebody who is very focused and knows our neighborhoods and knows the deployment strategies that will work and is willing to work across all of our agencies to make sure that MPD can support our prevention efforts as well. So with that, the Chief of Police, Robert Conti.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Let's give our mayor a round of applause for making public safety a priority in the District of Columbia. I want to thank the mayor for her careful consideration of this budget that has been proposed. As she mentioned, it's not about this or that, it's about what we need in the District of Columbia to really realize public safety and to meet the expectations of our residents, the people who have businesses in our city, and those who visit our city, our very beautiful city. It is important that these things here that are outlined be given serious consideration as this budget continues to move forward. I also want to take a moment to acknowledge, I see some other former cadets that are out in the audience as well. I see Detective Sergeant Marani Hines. I see a retired Sergeant Sonia Flipping in the background. Am I missing a few? Are there any other retired or former cadets out there? All right, one over here. Oh, O'Brien, where's O'Brien? Did I see him around here somewhere? Over there on the mayor's detail. So we got police cadets, former police cadets all around, and they are such a very important part of what we do here in the Metropolitan Police Department, how we make our city a safer city, and how we continue to make sure that young people, young residents of the District of Columbia have their fair shot into middle class. I can tell you that from my personal story, it is what allowed me to have my fair shot into the middle class, and young people across the city today are still reaping the benefits of what the Police Cadet program has to offer. Just take a look behind us. Yeah, that deserves a round of applause, because we could be chasing them down and having to do a whole bunch of other stuff with them. But right now, they stand on the front of Dunbar Senior High School as we talk about the investments that are being made into the Metropolitan Police Department. We know that MPD is an essential element of making our city safer, and investments in our budget are necessary to continue the citywide resurgence. The mayor's budget will assist MPD with the hiring bonus for new recruits. We simply put, we're looking at what's happening across the entire landscape as we make these recommendations. We're looking across what's happening in the entire landscape of public safety, and we have to make sure that we are able to recruit the best and brightest police officers. And we're in competition with every police department that's within 100 miles of the District of Columbia. That's real. That's fact. And if MPD is going to stand out, we have to do things that are different, some things that are different from what we've done before to attract people, but as the mayor mentioned, not just get them here, but once we get them here, we want to keep them. That's very, very, very important to us as we make our way towards our path of 4,000 police officers. We offer a temporary housing stipend for new recruits. Why? Because we want them to live in the District of Columbia. We want them to come to our city. As we talk about new recruits, as we talk about our police cadets, we want to give them opportunities. But offering them a housing incentive is also something that's very, very, very important to moving this process forward. A program to allow officers who live in the district to have access to a dedicated take-home car. Again, we're in a very competitive market. One of the things that we've also included in the budget, expanding our education incentives, staff to support our officers, wellness program, and in leadership and development efforts. We want to make sure that we have the best and brightest police officers who graduated from District of Columbia high schools and go on to college here in the District of Columbia, but that we continue to invest in them to make them the best and brightest future police chiefs and assistant chiefs and commanders, because I assure you, I have a personal testimony that it's possible for all of these young people up here to sit in leadership positions within the Metropolitan Police Department, and it is wise of us to invest in homegrown talent because we know the benefit of what can come once you invest in our young people. So we want to continue to do that. That's important. We want to continue to fund force multipliers that will support our efforts to combat crime. And one of the best ways we can recruit homegrown talent for the Metropolitan Police Department is through our Police Cadet program. Let me tell you a little bit about our police cadets before we get ready to honor our principals. Our police cadets, our young people, once they graduate high school, we're starting them out with a salary of $35,637. Talk about investing in young people at 17, 18 years of age. That is a huge investment by this mayor for these young people. That deserves a round of applause, and all of y'all should be clapping. their recruiting salary after becoming police cadets and they transition over to police officers, again, on a path to the middle class, we start them out at $60,199. That's you guys. And now offering $6,000 in rental assistance to assist our young people as well. Because sometimes, and I can tell you this, sometimes our young people who come to us, they're in some situations. Some of them are in households that in order for them to remain a member of the police department, they got to remove themselves from those households. That's real talk. Some of our young people are coming into our program and they have children already, as Officer Brock testified to. Right? That's important stuff. It's important stuff to make sure that not only do we give them the job, but we also give them the support that will help them to do the things that they need to do so that they see what it's like on the other side once they become police officers. So I'm excited about these investments that the mayor has put forth, and I fully support all of these things. The one thing that she asked me, Chief, what do you need? And don't hold back. And, you know, and as I go through those things, the mayor has actually realized these things in this budget. So I'm excited about that. I would now like to honor principals at the top 3 D.C. public schools, high schools, for Berluce Senior High School, Dunbar High School, and Eastern Senior High School, who have provided MPD with the most cadets since fiscal year 2018. I can tell you, like, these principals are so very important. My principal was Ann Thomas. She's still living. She lives on the Gold Coast up off of 16th Street. And Ms. Thomas, if you're watching this, it happened. So I appreciate you and thank you for the investment that you made in me and making sure that I did what I was supposed to do as a young Green Wave at Spingarn Senior High School. I really appreciate you for that. Thank you. Oh, absolutely. She earned that one. She earned that. And she made sure that she invested in the kids in that school, in Spingarn Senior High School, because she knew that if we were to stay on the hill, if we were to stay on 21st Street, you know, doing what I'm doing now would probably have not been an option for me. But for these principals who invested in young people, those same young people who you see traversing the hallways, the reality of what's going to happen as they transition into the cadet program and you see them 5 and 10 years later has not been revealed yet. But I know that that day is coming when one of those young people will be standing here thanking you for the investment that you've made in them. So I want to thank you in advance for all that you do day in and day out, and maybe not the best situation. Sometimes we know that dealing with young people can be a struggle sometimes. God knows, right? But if you quit, if you gave up, if you didn't continue to invest in them, I assure you, Robert Conti wouldn't be standing right here today. It didn't come with it certainly didn't come without its struggles, but the realization of what these young people, the investments that's being made in them, and what they are going to do for the city of the District of Columbia has not yet been revealed. But I believe that the future is bright for them because of what you have done. So thank you in advance for all that you guys have done. So at this point, I'd like to recognize Principal Willie Jackson of Ballou Senior High School. We did our kickoff event at Ballou last year, and thank you, Mr. Jackson, for coming out, sir. Oh, you walk gingerly, brother. I heard you walk gingerly. Oh, right here, I'm sorry. I know that's right. I know that's right. The next principal is Nadine Smith from Dunbar Senior High School. Thank you, Principal Smith. And next, we'd like to recognize Principal Saw Brown from Eastern Senior High School. He's a tall fella.
Thank you.
Again, let's give all of our principals a round of applause. Now, I should warn our principals that, you know, since we started rolling out our new program, you got some competition coming your way. We almost had to add another seat because as we look across the board, you guys are running neck and neck about 15 police cadets that have come from your schools, but there's some schools that are gaining on you. I got to tell you, so as the program continues to be known widely across District of Columbia schools, both public and charter schools. We just want you guys to continue to work hard, continue to make the investment, continue to do what you do. And obviously, if there's anything that we can do from the Metropolitan Police Department to assist in that endeavor, getting our recruiting team out to the schools for a special session or whatever it is that we can do to assist, we will do that. And that goes for any school, any public high school, charter school in the District of Columbia. We can come out, you extend the invitation, I assure you, our team will be there. We will be there to make sure that your young people, that they understand what this program is all about, talk to our young people about how they can contribute to communities, and talk to our young people about success and what that looks like. So with that, that will end the formal comments at this point, and if there are any questions for the mayor or I, we can certainly address any questions you may have.
Questions, press first, and then any community questions. Sam?
For you, Mayor, just curious, is there a change in attitude? Obviously, you're going to have, well, I guess you don't just know that the council is going to accept this budget, but is there a change in attitude in the last couple of years? And if so, what do you attribute that to?
Well, I think the community has always wanted to make sure that we had fully funded MPD. I don't think that's changed. And so what has changed, however, is we've gone down from over 3,800 officers to just over 3,500 officers. And we've seen our response times tick up. You just can't argue with the math. And I know that DC residents are very focused on making sure that this package in its entirety is improved.
For example, and I brought this up before, and I don't think the chief likes it, but still, every time we hear of a significant crime, the police are there. So does that say you don't have enough when basically anytime we hear about a big crime in D.C., the police are within earshot?
Certainly the police may be close, and that's a good thing, and that bodes well for us being able to solve the crime and maybe being able to save a life. So I think that's a good thing. And what we also know is from communities when they don't see police, that they see increased activity, increased hanging out, more gunshots. People don't feel safe. People won't walk down a street that's close to their house. And we know that police presence changes that. And that's why we have to have a fully staffed police department. Yes?
What makes 4,000 the magic number for you guys?
We know when we've been at 4,000 that we have been able to manage overtime, and we've seen decreased violence in the city. We also know that we won't get to 4,000 tomorrow. So it is important that not only we hire as many people as we can that are highly qualified and share our DC values. It's also important that we retain the good officers that we have. Police departments like ours, we can see attrition levels up to 300 people a year retiring, moving on. And that is why I have emphasized that it's very important that our retention package that is listed here is also favorably approved, because that is how we can get back to the numbers that we were. Even 3,800 most recently is when we hire great people and we keep great people. And that is what this package is designed to do.
Members of the council come to you and say that the numbers are okay as it is, that a higher number doesn't matter. You're going to tell them that the facts just prove the opposite?
Well, I'm going to tell their residents to talk to them like they talk to me. And members of the council know very well that having decreased numbers mean you can't provide the services at the same level. And some argue that we can just replace police officers with security guards. Some argue that we can just send mental health support instead of sending the police. And it's true. We can send more mental health providers on police calls, but those mental health providers, they want the police too. So it is not trading one thing for the other, but adding both. And we are certainly focused on that. We have deployed mental health providers to hospitals, to repeat calls. When we know we have a repeat mental health consumer, we can have somebody go out with the police. So we're all for all of those things, but it does not mitigate our need for a fully staffed force. It is also just poor management to extend our officers to their breaking point and use vast amounts of overtime. Last year, I was so concerned that we had the number of officers that we need in neighborhoods across the city that I did something that is unusual. I told the police chief to use whatever overtime he needed. And he said, Mayor, I'm going to do that, but I want you to be aware of this. I can't work my officers to their breaking point. They make poor decisions, they get burned out, they leave policing. So it's just necessary that we have the number of officers that are going to let us deploy across the city, let us police special events and First Amendment activities, and let us be present in communities where people are scared. Now, I'm just going to tell you, I talked to a neighbor the other day. She moved from Columbia Heights. She moved. She said she was scared in her neighborhood. At the same time, I hear leaders that represent Columbia Heights saying, let's just send, this person or that person, when the neighbors want police presence. I have one of my staffers, brought her home, did everything right? Brought her home in Columbia Heights. And she told me, Mayor, actually I feel a little scared sometimes, but I feel better when I see a police car parked by the Metro. These are real stories from real Washingtonians, and I just don't know. Now, I've been on the council. I don't know how you reject that. And what I don't want people to get lost in is this number 4,000. Focus on 347, because that's what this budget proposes that we hire in the upcoming year. Focus on keeping 300. Because that's the number that we might lose if we don't have some aggressive retention strategies. And that's how we get to the number of officers that we need.
Hey, Mayor, or the Chief, either one. So the one thing that I was doing some research on this, and back in 2015, at the time that he was Deputy Mayor for Public Safety and Justice, Kevin Donahue said something along the lines of, it's not just how many officers you have, it's how you use them. It's effectively arguing that, again, you could have 10,000 police officers, and if they're poorly used, you'll still have crime effectively. So how do you balance those two considerations, that you may eventually get to 4,000 police officers, but has there been a study within MPD to figure out, are officers where they need to be? Are they spending more time responding to calls than what their equivalents in other cities would be spending? Kind of getting into the nitty-gritty of what an officer is doing and how to best use that time.
Well, you want somebody outside to tell this 30-year police officer how to deploy MPD to best police outside neighborhoods? That's ridiculous. Is that your question?
I mean, the police chief is there and he can answer the question. I know that in the research that I've done, there was one study in 2012 when Mayor Gray was mayor that looked at this exact question, and it found that DC police officers were spending more time than in other cities responding to calls. And so it does raise the question of, is 35 okay, 36 okay, or 4,000? But again,
as I said, focus on this number, 347. That's what we need this year. You want to argue about next year? Have at it. But right now, what I'm telling you is we could lose 300 officers this year, and if I don't have this funding, we can go down to 3,200 police officers. And we're going to have increased response times and more crime. That's what I'm telling you. So focus on 347. And you ask anybody who raises the argument, study, 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 if that is acceptable in Washington, D.C. Any other questions? Yes.
So, Mayor Bowser, you've mentioned a lot about retention.
Yep.
Could you give some specifics about exactly what the incentives would be for officers to stay as DC police officers? And, we've heard a lot about getting to that 347, but how to reduce that 300 number?
Sure. So one is to really look at education benefits. One is to look at take-home police cars, which in our interviews with recruits is higher on their lists, and there's something that competing jurisdictions are very focused on. And I think those are the ones that we want to focus on today.
So there's no
There's
no
also-
monetary bonus for staying on past, or I know, and I don't know, do you still have the senior detective or senior
We
officer
do.
program? So are you expanding that, or anything monetarily that you're doing to keep these officers?
Sure. I think I'm going to ask the chief, because you're testing my memory on senior police. But we worked over the last couple of budget cycles, and the chief can bring me up to speed on that.
Yeah, we're still continuing to work in that space, Mark, where we have a very active senior police officer program. As I mentioned, I'm looking at one of them back there now, Sergeant Flipping, as an example. I'm embarrassing her a little bit, but she retired as a sergeant, but she's coming back as a senior police officer to work with our police cadets. So that is still a very active program. We still are utilizing that program for members who want to, they still want to be here, they still want to continue to serve, and certainly we'll continue to operate in that space. With the budget, the mayor talked about the education incentive. Those are things that in the past we've run out of money for. I mean, we've done it on a small scale. When you're talking about paying off tuition for a member who might not have a tuition, but later on down the line, you know, he's trying to relieve some debt that his child might have or something like that. I mean, those are things that we're trying to think about to really kind of cut it at both ends, right? You need to focus on the people who are coming through the door, but we also got to focus on the people who are on the back end who, you know, might not receive a signing bonus, but they're on the back end of their career. What are things that we do in that space to help keep those people?
So, Chief, can I have a
Sure.
follow-up for you? So, you know, we've heard from you that that the vaccine requirement has been an impediment a little bit in hiring. I've heard from officers who have said they're leaving because of the vaccine or just because of the burnout that you talked about. So what do you say directly to an officer who comes to you and say, Chief, I know I could do another couple of 5 years. I'm thinking about going to another department. I'm not just going fishing, but I just don't want to be at MPD anymore. What do you say to that officer?
Yeah, you know, Mark, I talked with chiefs of police from all around the country. I was just with them a couple of days ago. I would say to them, you know, if you think the grass is green on the other side, I'd say the water bill is higher too. That's what I would say to that, Mark, because every chief of police of every major city police department is experiencing the exact same thing across the board, with the exception of 1 or 2 departments. Everybody is having these issues. I think that, you know, when you talk about recruiting and retention, you know, one of the things that we try to do here in the nation's capital that's really different from a lot of other places, we try to get a recruit class in the academy every month. That is an incredible task to do that. People come into this profession. Some people leave this profession because they have other opportunities, quite frankly. We get people with master's degrees and doctorates, and they decide that they want to transition and do other things, and that's fine. But I think in that same space, we have to continue to be active in our recruiting because, as the mayor said, we know every year we stand to lose at least 300 people through resignation, through retirements, et cetera, and we want to make sure that we stay on that task. Recruiting is not something that just stops, right? So when we don't hire, as an example, like we find ourselves in this posture right now. One other thing, as the mayor mentioned, yeah, let's focus on the 347 for right now, but here's the other real part to that. At the end of the day, the net gain of police officers, once this gets approved, is about 36 additional officers from where we are now. So the struggle and the issue right now, it is real. It is very real, and we have to make sure that we are on that pathway to 4,000 now. When we talked about this 2 years ago and we said, hey, we get below 3,800, that is problematic for us. Now we're down to 3512 is where we are now, and you know, people are wondering why response times and so forth are going up. There are real issues there. I can't overstate, you know, what we're trying to do in terms of keeping our members here and trying to find ways to attract members to this department. We have to stay at that. It has to be something that's in the front of the mind of every police official within this department to make sure that we're doing the absolutely best we can, Mark. Any other questions? Okay, Sam?
Is it kind of like a bidding war in a sense? I heard 20,000 is what you're offering as a signing bonus right now for MPD. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I mean, you look at our neighborhood jurisdictions, right, just around us, and the Maryland jurisdictions most closer to us, Metro Transit, they are offering like a $10,000 signing bonus. And you look across the country at places like Seattle, $25,000. What was proposed for Oakland recently was $50,000. It has not been approved, but all things that police officers are people. If it's you and you're looking for a job and you have your choice of different places that you can choose to work, and you have this potential employer offering you A, B, C, and D, and this potential employer offering you whatever it is, if you are in a position where you have your 60 college credit hours, we're not changing our hiring standards. So you have your police departments that you can choose from, you're going to accept the best package. It's happening right now in corporate America where you have people who are evaluating whether or not if they can get 100% telework versus having to go into the office every day. The folks who get the 100% telework, that's attractive for people who have children and other things. It's the same thing in law enforcement when you talk about these incentives. I'm not saying at all that this is the panacea, it solves all problems, but we have to keep this in the forefront of our mind as we move forward and continue to talk to our young people about what are the things that are important to them, right? Because this generation, the things that were important when my generation came on, it was all about retirement. These young people, a lot of them, they're looking at the next 5 years. And in 5 years, they could change and do something else. It's no different in other places within corporate America where you have an educated workforce who have an opportunity to do something different.
The one dynamic you mentioned, which is interesting to DC and distinct to DC, is all the protests that come into town and the MPD has to staff. Have you had any additional conversations with federal agencies to say, look, we've seen this amount of uptake, we're spending this amount of money and this amount of manpower staffing all these protests. Is there more money you can kick our way? Is there could the Park Police or the Capitol Police do more of this? Like anything along those lines?
At the end of the day, sir, when we have demonstrations in the District of Columbia, and we work very closely with our federal partners, I'll start and say that. But at the end of the day, public safety, people look to the Metropolitan Police Department, whether it's truckers, whether it's whatever else that's happening. This morning we had 15 people across 395 that blocked traffic. That falls on the MPD to deal with. Whatever else is happening, everything, it's on the Metropolitan Police Department. And some of those other agencies, they're struggling as well. We are competing with those agencies for resources as well. So it's an issue, again. It's something that we don't just, you do this and that's it. We have to stay on the forefront of this and continue to watch this thing. And guess what? This picture, as it develops over time, and it could look very different in the next 6 months. And we got to stay there, making sure that we're focused on it. Thank you.
Any community questions? Yes, ma'am. Commissioner?
On behalf of my over 2,000 constituents, we stand with you.
Thank
We
you.
support MPD. But that said, I represent these 2 blocks over there, those row houses.
Yep.
And I am now at a loss for words about what to tell them because the amount of car break-ins and criminal activity in those 2 blocks can be literally off the chain. And I advocate for foot patrols. So on behalf of my constituents, please give us foot patrols.
Okay, thank you for that statement. And we want to put the full package of tools in their hands, like our camera rebate program, reminders, of course, to lock up your valuables, remove valuables from the car, but also the camera program can help us. It's helped the chief a lot in identifying porch bandits. And I don't like to make light of that when somebody comes and steals your property. So we want to make sure that everybody knows that we pay a lot of attention to that camera footage that we get, and we take that property crime seriously as well. Any other questions, community questions? Okay, thank you, everybody. Thank you, MPD. Give them a big round of applause.